It's back. The Pen to Publish podcast is having two more series added, and we're excited to be talking again about all things writing and publishing. If you're planning to pen and publish, then this podcast is for you. The next two series will be covering more writing and editing tips and includes all of the issues we see repeated time and time again with new writers. The feedback from the last 6 series have been so positive, and we are being listened to as far-flung from Australia, Qatar, and now obviously Canada too. We're really excited to be coming back and bringing you more wonderful pen and writing info. Ready for your weekend listening. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter, and independent publisher. And
I'm Alexa Tewkesbury, author, editor, and proofreader. Now, we have lots of writing resources for you, which can be found on our Pen to Published website, where you'll also find all the show notes and guest information for each episode too. There's also our Writers Refinery Facebook group, which you can join. If you just look for the Writers Refinery, this is a great place to meet and interact with other writers and authors, and we'd love to see you there. And we also love getting feedback because that really helps with our rankings. So please do leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you get notified when there are new episodes available. Now, there is also the interim pity pods. Now, these are bite-sized episodes of word wisdom, so do look out for those too. Right, let's get started.
well, we're back for series 7. Hello, Alexa.
Hello, this is such a treat. From across the oceans to you in Canada, where you have had so much more blue sky than we have. We're back to talking about books.
It's back great. To talking about books. We've had a bit of a gap purely because, I have moved, as we have just said.
Some people are so selfish, really.
Yeah, moved many, 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 many miles away. Plus, I got married as well. I think I mentioned something about that in the last series 6, that I was getting married. Well, I am now. And I'm in Canada now, and Alexa's in Devon. So we come across the miles for you to bring you a brand spanking new series, which we're really looking forward to. And today's episode, we're going to be coming up with how to think about ideas for your book. Now, Alexa, I know you're really excited to be talking about this because you and I have had more time to not only learn, but also get feedback and experience from people who we've met, people who have listened, people who are in the group, the Facebook group that we run, about how people get ideas. So what is it? What is the best way? I know we spoke about this in, I can't remember what series. What series did we talk about?
It was series 1 back in 2021.
Wow.
You know, I was practically still a teenager then. But anyway, we began by talking about ideas. You know, you want to write a book. Some people might think, oh, it's odd if you have no ideas. Why do you want to write a book? But you can think, well, I really want to write a book, but I can't formulate anything in my head. So I thought I'll just recap over what we mentioned in that episode, and then I'm going to develop it a bit, give you some pointers as to how to develop your ideas into more of a kind of a book plan rather than just a little scenario. But one of the first things I want to say is that you need to be passionate about your story idea. If it gives you that little shiver of anticipation, then it's probably something that you should be pursuing. And if it doesn't, maybe it's just not the thing that you should be writing. Because it's hard writing a book, that's one thing. If you're pursuing a traditional publishing route, that's incredibly hard. If you're putting yourself into all the marketing, having self-published your book, also incredibly hard. So you have to believe wholeheartedly in your book. And if the scenario doesn't really do it for you, then it's going to be really tough to write it. And ultimately, it probably won't interest the reader either, because if you're a bit towards it, I think that's going to come over. So to recap from episode 1, we talked about different ways, different places really where you can collect story ideas. So there's people watching, You can observe, you can listen, you can, as unobtrusively as possible, listen to what people are saying on street corners or in cafes or at bus stops. You can possibly start your story with a character if an interesting character pops into your head, or perhaps if there's someone in your family who has a particularly ear-catching story or interesting characteristics. And you might know about your past family. Perhaps there's an ancestor that you want to find out more about who you think could actually be a really good central character in a story. If you think about what celebrities uncover in Who Do You Think You Are,
Mm.
you could ask, well, if that was me, supposing I found that out about my family, what could I do with that?
I think
So
you
so
have
you
to be
can
careful, though, don't you, with where fact and fiction, you know, where that goes from fact to fiction. I think you have to, especially if it's a fiction book, you have that declaration at the beginning of the book that says all these characters are fictional or whatever the declaration is. So I do think if you are taking any inspiration from your family story, that you disguise it well so you're not going to
Mm.
get into any trouble, and very much sort of change the gender of the person or change the timeline. Just do this with caution, but definitely is a great place to go. My dad has a not a hidden secret, but he doesn't know who his grandfather is. Now, back in those days, not knowing who your grandfather was, considered very, you didn't talk about it. So his family story, there's definitely, where did the name Alexander Witten come from, which was his name. So yes, I think definitely you can tease out some fabulous ideas from family history, but just do remember to disguise it well so that no distant cousin's going to come along going, I recognize that person.
Yes, yes, definitely change names and places and all that sort of stuff as well. Yes, that is a really good point. But I think sometimes you might just hear something thing and think, oh, that's really interesting. Like the book I'm writing at the moment, children's book, one of the character names came from, we were visiting a National Trust property in Norfolk, Felbrick Hall, and one of the character names came from a little register, handwritten register in the kitchen with one of the maids' names on. And so I took
Mm.
the first name and then I combined it with the Felbrigg, but not the whole name,
Yes.
to just create a name that I really liked. So I think things like that can be a really great jumping off point. Other things, again, to use, I suppose, carefully, but news items.
Mm.
Something crops up on the news, you think, oh, what could I do with that? Because you don't have to use it verbatim. You can put your own spin on it. Other
Although it,
books or
although it seems at the moment that fiction that was written back in the day is now becoming true life. I mean,
it's it's
George Orwell,
horrifying.
if George Orwell
Yeah,
was here. Anyway,
scary.
we're not getting into political
Yes, no.
talk.
Other books and television programs are also something again to use as a springboard, not to pinch the ideas. But if you think just about fan fiction
Mm,
is basically all these sort
mm,
of spring-offs, I don't know if that's the right word, of an original, and even in original old book. Think of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
mm.
And there's a kind of comedy musical show, I think, on stage touring of Pride and Prejudice, I think. Something like that, anyway. So there are just ways, because some things are out of copyright after a certain length of time as well, which makes it a bit easier. But there's just things like that can really tweak your imagination and get it going.
There's a
And
whole
then you can,
series of Darcy books, aren't there, told from the Darcy's perspective.
yes,
So yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a really good idea. You could be definitely inspired by a book that you've read and then take it one step further and delve into a minor character. I think you have to be careful that the book's out of copyright with character names. I think you better just double check that. But yes, there's been a whole plethora of books all about Mr. Darcy.
Then also, now you can look at what's trending in your genre in the book world, but a couple of things to bear in mind is how quickly can you get your book out to catch the trend? And the other is, don't write a book about something specific just because it's trending. If you think back to, gosh, it was probably 10 years or so ago now, because I remember when my daughter was reading them, when everything was vampires in YA fiction. So there would be no point trying to write a book about vampires at that time unless you love stories about vampires. If what you really want to write is, say, a 1920s cozy crime, why would you write about a vampire just because you think, oh, I could hop onto that bandwagon? Going back to what I said at the start, you just need to be passionate about your story and believe in your story. So those were the main things anyway that we mentioned. Was that 3 years ago? But there's more than that. So if you think about how athletes train to get good at their sport, they're working the muscles they need to work to keep performing at the level they need to perform. And their muscles know what to do. They've been training them for so long. They know what their job is. And it's the same with writers. The more you write and the more you read, the more you're training your brain to perform in the way that you want it to. So you want it to have ideas and be able to flesh them out. And you want it to get good at creating captivating beginnings and clever twists and satisfying endings. But you also want it to get good at receiving ideas, at noticing them or being struck by something or someone that could spark a story. So, as I've said, that snippet of conversation or that weird story in the news, the writer's brain doesn't just need to be able to write, it also needs to be triggered by the possibilities of a story. And you can train your brain to notice those things. And then you have your notebook with you and think, oh, yes, all right. Funnily enough, there was a word came on television the other day, argy-bargy. And I suddenly thought, I don't know if any of you will probably go and write this down, but I suddenly thought, oh, that would be a brilliant character, a naughty boy in a children's picture book called Argy Bargy. And just, do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think it's just need to be receptive. I suppose that's the word. So when you're out for a walk, out shopping, doing the ironing, if people still iron, I don't, but anyway, just let your mind go and see what happens. Think about what's in the news. Think about the podcast interview you listen to. Think about the person you might have seen crying at the station. What can your brain do with those things? And train it to be like a seedbed of ideas. Social media is another place you can go to. You can look at what's trending. You can look at what people are saying. What are they being shocked at or affronted or horrified by? Is there anything in there that you can give to a character to help form your character or to help create your plot? And then you can also think of scenarios. So think of something and then ask what if. In this example, so your character might have a noisy neighbor. That might be your little tiny scenario. And then you can start asking what if about that. So what if one day your character decides they've had enough of the noise and they snap? What if they then go round to confront the noisy neighbour? What if there's no answer when they bang on the front door, so they go round the back? What if the back door is open? What if they step through the back door and find the noisy neighbour dead on the floor? Can you see, if you just take that idea and think, okay, but what if? And don't be afraid to go where your brain takes you. Just write every idea down, even if they seem a bit freaky and not what you were expecting. At every key point in your story, there isn't just one way it can go. There are multiple ways. You just need to figure out the best of the bunch. So ask yourself, of all the possible things that could happen next, what is going to drive the story forward most, or most shock the reader, or develop the main character the best? I recently taught a couple of modules on a performing arts course, and one of them was improvisation. And we used this what if concept to help participants develop a story starter. So for an improvisation to work, each individual involved, whether that's two or more in a group, they have to be willing to accept what's being offered to them. If you block another person's offer, the scene is going nowhere. So for instance, someone might say, they might step into a scene and say, I'm going to London tomorrow. Do you want to come with me? So that's the offer. If the other person just says no, then they've blocked the idea, that offer. But they've also put the onus back on the other person again to try to take the scene somewhere. So it'd be much better if it went like this. I'm going to London next month. Do you want to come with me? Oh, yes, my brother is in Pentonville prison and it'll be a great chance to visit him. Now the scene can move on because not only has the person accepted the offer, but they've also introduced something else because suddenly this isn't just a day out in London, there's some kind of criminal thing going on here. So you could continue it. I didn't know your brother was in prison and just carry it on. Oh, what did he do?
Hmm.
He broke into a cake shop and stole a cream slice. He's in Pentonville prison for stealing a cream slice. Oh no, that's because of the shop owner he murdered when they tried to stop him. Do you see? You can keep, but you've just got to be open, but you can do that with your own brain. I did that with my own brain, and you can make the scene escalate in that way. So you just keep accepting your own offers.
That's very clever. And also, you've added a brilliant comedic value there because, yes, because he stole a cream slice, and you're just left thinking, what? Like you said, how did he do that? And then obviously, yes, because he murdered the owner. It's very clever. And you're basically saying, don't be afraid to offshoot the what if scenario to all sorts of interesting things. And you might
Yes,
have four or five of them. And then
yes,
you take which one speaks to you the best.
yes. You can do it when you get to particular points in your story and you suddenly think, oh, I don't know where to go. Just think, well, what if that? What if that? What if that? And then you pick the one that you think takes the story on in the best way. And whatever you're aiming for with your story, which of those solutions is the best one that will take you to the next
Mm,
point in your story? And then if you find after a sort of few idea seeding sessions like that you have several ideas that you really like and you don't know which to choose, which is quite a nice position to be in, really. You can see which one you can move on from the simple idea, like, for example, the noisy neighbor, to something that can be developed into a fully formed storyline. So you can start thinking about, well, if I did the noisy neighbor, who are the main protagonists going to be? What might the main character be struggling with? Is there a flaw that they have that will affect the outcome of the story? Can you see where a plot twist could be effective? Is the idea strong enough to sustain a beginning, a middle, and an end? And can you see how it could be developed to that extent? Now, you don't have to do a detailed plan to discover that. I think you can just think it through stage by stage. And again, I think there's a lot of mulling in
mhm.
writing and a lot of mulling in the early stages. Lots of groundwork to do when you're preparing to write a book. I don't know, there may be some people that just think, oh, I'll see what that, and just do it, sit down and it just all flows. But I think if you have like the germ of an idea, it really pays to just start thinking, okay, how can I flesh this out? Is it possible? Does it turn into a full story when I really start looking at all the details and asking what next and what if? But also, when you do that, when you can prove to yourself that you could write this story that would be interesting and exciting and page turning, then that gives you the confidence when you're writing. Because when you come to the difficult bits, you can think, but I know I can get to that ending because I've thought it all through in my head. And I know I can get to that point. You don't want to start a book and then think, oh, I don't know where it's going now. I think doing that, taking any ideas that you've got and just seeing which one has the most legs here.
Definitely. This is definitely something that you should be doing anyway, is make sure you have a quick ideas capture with you, be it pen and paper or using the record app on your phone. Or if you need to take a photograph, that could possibly be a trigger for some kind of story. Definitely. The other thing to do, and this might be a bit strange to bring into this episode where we're coming up with ideas, but read as well. Read stories, read books. Because, like Alexa said, you've got to be able to see this idea all the way through. Make sure you've got a beginning, middle, and end. The best stories, I always think, like Alexa said, does the main character have a flaw? Most books that are the most gripping, the protagonist has a flaw that either gets resolved or is a continual flaw all the way through that becomes part of their identity, but it's rather a, I don't know, humanizing flaw. So it's really important coming up with an idea that you know you can take from A to B to C to D, because you're going to be sitting with this idea for a long time. I mean, when they've come up with an idea, I know we're not really getting into this in this episode. What's then the best thing that they can do to sort of keep hold of this idea to then flesh it out? What's the best thing they can do? Write it down, put it on a document?
I like writing things down, but if you want, you can also do the same thing in a document on the computer. You know, if you write down your like your scenario, type out your scenario, and then do that. Maybe just type or write what if,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can write down, as I did with the noisy neighbor, you know, what if the person next door suddenly loses it and can't deal with the noise any longer?
Yeah.
What if this? What if
Mm.
that? Or, and I think I said, what if when he goes around to the back door, it's open, and what if the noisy neighbor is lying dead on the floor? Well, you could think, okay, so I could do that, but I could also, what if when I walk into the kitchen because the door's open, his sister's in tears at the kitchen table because he's disappeared.
Mm.
Or that's another way the story could
Mm.
go. There doesn't have to be a murder, a murdered person on the
Or
floor.
or the neighbour's
Or
not there and the dog is in the garden. There's no sign of him, and the kitchen table's laid out for breakfast, and there's no sign of him. Like,
yes,
and the kettle's boiling on the stove or something. So what's then happened? Where is he?
yeah.
So,
So you can so just write down all these possibilities and then pick the one that you like and then do the same thing with that. So what if? So what could happen next? Whatever comes to you, just try and go with that. Try and like in the improvisation, accept if your brain gives you an offer, think, okay, I'll go with that because that doesn't have to be your finished book. It's just an idea that you could pursue. And so in the end, you will end up with a page or more of ideas and like little routes. Or it could go that way, or it could go that way. And you can pick out then what you like and make that into a firmer
mm,
plan for
mm,
yourself. That's like your map
yes,
of the book.
yes,
And with characters as well, you can think, well, I'd quite like to write this sort of character. Does that fit with that kind of storyline or with that kind of genre? What could the fatal flaw be? What
mm,
could the problem be for that character? So and where you said it just now about it being humanizing, I think with if there's a flaw, if there's something that the reader can connect with,
mm,
even if it's the baddie in your book, if there's something that the reader can connect with, then they care more.
yeah,
They care more because they can relate to it in some
yeah.
way.
I've read a series of books, or I started reading a series of books where the protagonist was perfect. She was this fit, gorgeous, beautiful, successful, intelligent, had no flaws protagonist. And she was an ex-FBI agent, but she was like, oh, it was just, I couldn't identify with her because she was too perfect. And I
Yes.
didn't care in the end. I didn't care about her. I didn't care enough about her to then read the second book because she had nothing to fix in her life. Whereas if you've got a character that's flawed or has something I can relate to or has something that I can identify with, usually if you're certainly going to write a series of books, then you want that protagonist to grow, to change from that. If it's a bad flaw or a nasty flaw, you want them to resolve it.
Mm.
And I think books that are able to take you on a journey, not only do we want to go through a story, of action, we also want to go through character development. And if they're this perfect person at the beginning, they're still going to be this perfect person at the end. And that's just boring. Like we're not
Yes.
taken on a journey with the character as well. And I think that is super important. So I know we're talking about coming up with ideas, but I think coming up with plausible flaws or a dilemma that the main protagonist is going through is just as important to come up with that too. Well, that's it. Wonderful way to open up series 7. I hope you've got some really good ideas about how you can come up with some story ideas and what you can do when you get an idea for a story, how you can then develop that. And no matter what it is, and don't forget, like Alexa Tewksbury says, keep asking the what if, what if, what if, what if. Take it in a completely different direction and don't be afraid of that, you know?
Yeah, don't be afraid of your ideas or what your brain throws at you, because I think those are the kind of ideas that are the best because they take you completely out of yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to start your book well. So we're going to be diving into some, properly good structural sort of plotting, probably. And no doubt Alexa will be sharing some really good tips on how to do that. And we will be coming to you from the Pen to Published podcast pod um, next week, ready for your weekend listening. So it's bye bye from me.
and bye bye from me.